How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to our series. So over the past few weeks, we have gone through sexual attraction and neurology. We've gone through Matthew Vine's book, God and the Gay Christian. We have gone through what to do when Scripture feels wrong. That was the most recent video. And Oh, and then we had a video as well, I think that we started with, which was identity, neurology, theology, and therapy, which that video did not perform well. But why would it? It was a little bit more like I said before, I was just kind of laying out all the science. So if anyone has any questions, like why did you come to that conclusion? What are you talking about? That was a very academic video where I cited all my sources and the description. I actually ran out of characters, so I had to pare down the characters on the description. So anyways, that brings us to a brand new side of the LGBTQIA plus theology discussion. And what I talked about in the last video is I talked about how I've been coming from a personal stance of if Scripture feels wrong to you, what can you do, right? So all of this has been through understanding how the brain works, how the mind works, and then we looked at the theology and we said, okay, does theology support this behavior, this act, this identity? And then after looking at the theology, we said, okay, seeing that the theology doesn't back that up, what can you as an individual do for yourself, right? How can you police yourself? How can you manage yourself? How can you run yourself? And that is according to a biblical worldview or a scriptural worldview. Of course, everyone is free to do whatever they want. Like I said, I'm very libertarian in my politics, in my beliefs. You do you. Like I want to save your soul. I want you to go to heaven, but I don't want to control you. I don't want to force you. It's not my agenda to like make you join my team. I evaluate a lot of things for myself, share that with friends and families and congregation members who have attended churches I've been at or my current church. So anyways, you do you if you're not convinced. But today I want to talk about how can we help people, how can we attempt to proselytize, to evangelize, right? And to bring people into health. So this whole conversation about health and wellness brings us to a sticking point of the debate, which is essentially going to be God and the trans Christian, right? So what is the theology of conversion? What we see is that conversion therapy is labeled as harmful and unethical. And what I've been doing over the past few days is I've been listening to conversion therapy survivor stories, things put out by Anthony Padilla, but also running into other, a myriad of other content creators and people who put out this kind of content to say, hey, we want to tell the story of what happened to people who identified as gay or trans or non-binary or gender fluid or whatever. And then they were essentially against their will taken to therapy, or with their will, but through abusive coercion, put through processes that were not what they signed up for, not what they would have wanted. And I got to tell you, these stories are tragic and they're heartbreaking. And they are, and the comment I just kept wanting to write on these videos, I don't think I did, I held myself back, was saying this. The Crusades were wrong. The witch hunts were wrong. And everything happening in these videos to these conversion therapy survivors was wrong. Right? So we can, as Christians, say, hey, things that the capital C Church has participated in, we don't agree with. So we don't agree with what has happened through conversion therapy, especially like, now a lot of people throw out some of this like electroshock therapy and things like that. One of my favorite movies is The Imitation Game about Alan Turing. And as someone who loves programming, I love AI, I love robots, the Turing, Alan Turing, the Turing test, all that stuff fascinates me. And man, that movie is such an awesome movie as far as such a historical character and brought to life, and how just how amazing Alan Turing was, and so heartbreaking to see what happened to him through essentially he was, it was deemed illegal for him to be a homosexual, and it ended up, the drugs they put him on ended up killing him and taking his life from him. And that's heartbreaking, and I hate that. And I've encouraged certain Christians to watch that movie. And some Christians, when they hear that Alan Turing was homosexual, they won't watch the movie. And it's really unfortunate because it's a true story. And it's not a movie that fits any sort of political agenda. It's just telling the story of a very important character who basically created computing as we know it today, and also used it to help us win the war of World War II and breaking the Enigma code and the Enigma machine. So anyways, all that being said, I want to get into this conversation. It's a nuanced conversation. It's a difficult conversation. And that's the kind of conversations I'm interested in having. When I start to make a video and I say, here's the video I'm going to make, it's either someone has asked me to go do this thing, but a video like this is one that I am creating of my own free will and initiative. And why? Well, there's so many great videos out there, and I watch and listen to all sides of the debate, all sorts of conversations. I read a lot of books. If someone hands me a book, I will typically take that book and read it within 1 to 3 days. I'm a very fast reader, and I will take notes on it and make up my own book report on it. But this is a conversation that needs more nuance. It needs us to go deeper, and I'm gonna go into this in a way that I have not seen pastors go into this much nuance. I've not seen apologists go into this much nuance, and I wish they would, and I welcome them to do a better job than me. I do not have a degree in apologetics. I do not have a degree in neurology. I simply go read the literature and comment on what the literature says. And honestly, one thing that I've been doing is I've been running my ideas past people who are experts and going, hey, I read this. Does it mean this? And getting by often people say, yes, that's what it means. That's the right conclusion. And so I try to keep all my conclusions, that being said, in the realm of nuance, humility, factual basis, citing case studies, pointing to case studies. So let's get into this. Disclaimer, which I should have said even before now. This conversation is going to cover terms related to gender, sexuality, and sexual organs, right? That's important to know because we're going to be talking about trans. And we're going to be talking about this thing called DSD. We're going to define terms, but we're going to talk about is gender on a scale? Is it a spectrum? Is biological sex a thing or gender? It's been difficult because even as a Christian, just trying to listen along and follow the debate, and I'm not your typical Christian, right? I mentioned in my previous video that I've been labeled as a trans ally. That confuses me. I've never compromised my belief or my statements or my theology. I'm definitely more conservative. I'm definitely not a progressive Christian. But we're going to talk some of through this video. But I do get labeled as an ally to people that like my niece and her friends and people that I've met online. All of them are like, wow, you are very much not progressive, but an ally to the movement where I can invite conversations where we can talk about these things. So this conversation is going to cover terms related to gender, sexuality, sexual organs. Let's get into it. First, a quote that I thought was important is it's estimated that nearly 2% of live births are born with congenital conditions of atypical sex development. And so that's right. You can. I cited my source. I don't usually cite them so prominent, but I'm going to cite it now. So that's where that comes from. That's about 130 million people, about 2% of the world, which is a lot of people. But what does that really mean? Let's get into all of this. First, we're going to talk about today about DSD, which is differences in sexual development. We're going to talk about chromosomes. We're going to talk about sexual organs and how they develop and what they look like amongst different people. All of that to investigate, is gender and sexuality on a spectrum or not? Not according to the Bible, which we're going to talk about theology. I have theology in all my videos, but not just according to the Bible, but does science back up what we're seeing? I love quoting James W. Sire's Universe Next Door. Any worldview that we can possess should be coherent in the world we live in. I firmly believe that if you have a worldview that is not scientifically supported or is not even scientifically, science can only prove scientific claims, right? So when you get to philosophy, when you get to some of the other stuff, but the point is, if your worldview is not consistent with reality, it's gonna give you a headache. It's gonna cause you to grit like sandpaper against reality. So, basic terms here. Welcome to biology class. X chromosome is essential for life. The X chromosome contains genes essential for normal development and function. Both males, which are X chromosome and a Y chromosome, and females, double X chromosomes, have at least one X chromosome. Males inherit their single X chromosome from their mother, while females inherit the one X chromosome from each patient. Now, the Y chromosome carries the SRY gene, the sex-determining region Y, which triggers the development of male characteristics. The presence of the Y chromosome typically determines male sex. The Y chromosome is passed from father to son, making it a key marker for paternal lineage. Now, hormones. Sexual development in humans is influenced by a variety of hormones which play crucial roles at different stages of development, from fetal life through puberty and into adulthood. Atypical hormone levels can cause this DSD, differences in sexual development. Gonads. Gonads are the primary reproductive organs that produce gametes, sperm in males and eggs in females, and sex hormones such as testosterone in males, estrogen and progesterone in females. And then genitals. Genitals encompass the external and internal structures involved in sexual activity and reproduction. There's a difference between gonads and genitals. And that's as deep as we're going to get there, is that gonads. Just think of it as what produces sperm, estrogen, progesterone, and genitals being the actual like organ that you deal with. But they also, not just external, there's an internal component to your genitals as well, of course. And so now let's get to, does biology support the biblical claim? What is the biblical claim? Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. He created him in the image of God. He created them male and female. So God created mankind. It's really what that shapes out to be. Mankind, humanity, and created humanity in the image of God, male and female. He created them. So many Christians just say, look at the plumbing. Just look at the plumbing. So today we're going to examine the claim. Can you just look at the plumbing? How does that work? So I used to like, well, first of all, no, you can't just look at the plumbing, and we're going to get into why. I used to say, I used to think, I didn't actually say this publicly or to anyone, but I would think, and maybe say to my wife, right, but be like, well, just look at the chromosomes, right? Let's, you can't see the chromosomes, but my idea is, well, what determines if you're a male or a female? Well, it'd be your chromosomes. And you have either double X's or an XY, right? That's how it works. If you have double X's, then you're a female. If you have an XY, then you're a male. Like, that's simple enough. None of this, like, what is a woman? Like, Matthew Walsh says, what is a woman? A woman is someone with double X chromosomes. Well, is it that simple? Well, no. So we're going to go through some ways that, some different DSDs. Some people can have triple X, XXX, an extra X chromosome. Some people have an extra Y chromosome, an XYY. Some people have one X, no Y. That's called Turner syndrome. Some people have double X's and a Y. That's Klinefelter syndrome. There's mosaicism, which comes from the word mosaic. And mosaic is like when I learned in art class. It's when you take a bunch of pictures and you put them together to make a big picture. Have you ever seen that thing where it looks like an image of Abraham Lincoln, and then when you look close, it's a bunch of black and white photos of, whatever his time was. So mosaicism is a single egg, but a patchwork of genetically different cells. And then a chimera, my time playing D&D and fantasy and Dragon's Dogma and all these kind of games growing up helped me with words like chimera. But a chimera is, in fantasy terms, a chimera is like a beast that is multiple creatures put together. I think the one in typical video games is like the body of a lion with an extra head of a goat coming out, and the tail is like a snake. But in genetics, a chimera is when two eggs merge in the womb, becoming one person. And then there's microchimerism, which comes from that same word chimera, but it's micro chimerism. And that's cells between the mother and the son swap. So instead of two eggs coming together, it's weird. Some of the cells from the mom go through the placenta, and vice versa. And so the mother and son end up in microchimerism, end up swapping some of those cells, granting the son some double X chromosome cells and the mother some X and Y chromosome cells. And that's one thing I want to bring up too, is that your chromosomes are cellular. So what we're seeing here is it can be possible to have some cells in your body that have different chromosomes than the rest of your body. So let's get through some of these. I don't want to take too long on these, and I'll tell you why in a second. But you have triple X syndrome. That is a female with female genitals. Individuals with triple X syndrome, trisomy X, it can also be called, can experience puberty, menstruation, and have the potential to conceive and give birth, just like individuals with double X chromosomes. So it's pretty much a typical woman. However, it's important to note that triple X syndrome can have a wide range of effects, and not all individuals will experience the same symptoms or challenges. Some individuals with triple X syndrome may have regular menstrual cycles. So they're female. They're not genetically trans, right? We're going to get through some of the easy ones, and we're going to get to the really hard ones, which is actually more when we talk about hormones. But the next one is called Jacob syndrome. And that's a male. It's a male. Oops, a make. Let me fix that. Male. Saved. That's a male with male genitals. Okay. But they have an extra Y. And so, generally, individuals with XYY syndrome are fertile and can father children. However, they may be slightly increased on risk of infertility or reduced fertility compared to typical XY males. We're going to move on from this one pretty quick, but if you have Jacob syndrome, XYY, you're a male with male genitals. You're genetically male. You're not genetically trans. So far, genetics not showing a spectrum. Turner syndrome, 1X. That's a female with female genitals, still female. It's just you don't have a double X or an XY. You're just a single X. You will have reproductive challenges. One significant implication of Turner syndrome is infertility. We don't need to spend a long time on this for the sake of this, but all the information's there if you want to pause the video and read it. But it is genetically female, not genetically a trans person or on a spectrum. Klinefelter syndrome, male, so double X's and a Y. And so this one's interesting. This is a male with male genitals. But Klinefelter syndrome is associated with hypergonadism, which refers to reduced function in the testes. This can lead to reduced production of testosterone, resulting in infertility, smaller testes, and a decreased sperm production. So essentially, it's a person who is genetically male. You have male genitals, but you also have a little bit more feminine qualities because of the extra X chromosome that you have. And so, right, you're going to have sparse facial and body hair, smaller testes, and a slightly increased risk of health conditions and osteoporosis. So again, still, you're going to have some issues. You're still going to be more, you might be not traditionally masculine, right? You're not going to be on like the brawny, the lumberjack who sells us paper towels, right? You're not gonna be that guy, most likely, right? But you're still genetically male. You're not genetically trans. So you will be a man who can father babies. You cannot get pregnant, right? So that's what we're looking at here. Mosaicism, male or female, which is it? Well, there are no documented cases of an individual with mosaicism who simultaneously possesses a functioning penis and produces fertile sperm and a fertile uterus capable of sustaining pregnancy. So mosaicism by its nature, so we're talking about like two eggs coming together. So what if it's a male egg and a female egg, right? Like where one possesses male characteristics and one is female characteristics, and then they merge into a mosaic, right, to come together. How will that work? And so overall, while mosaicism can lead to variations in reproductive development, individuals with this condition are generally classified as reproductively male or female based on predominant genetic and anatomical characteristics. So, in regards to mosaicism, there has never been a genetically trans individual recorded in any historical literature or medical literature. So essentially, you will come out with either the ability to have a baby and right, and you can get impregnated and have a baby, or you'll be born with the ability to father children and impregnate someone else. So there is no documented cases of like a male and a female coming together in the womb and creating a some sort of trans on the spectrum, male to female, female to male. They can impregnate people and they can get pregnant. That doesn't exist. So that's as close as we get so far, but still not male or female. Chimeras. We won't have to spend too long on this, but while chimerism can lead to a mosaic pattern of genetic composition within the same individual, the reproductive organs typically exhibit characteristics that align with one sex or another. For example, a chimera with predominantly XX chromosomes, typically found in females, may have female reproductive anatomy, such as ovaries and a uterus. A chimera with predominantly XY chromosomes, typically found in males, may have male reproductive anatomy, such as testes and a penis. Right? Like I said, I gave my disclaimer. We're talking about organs here. Welcome to sex ed in the weirdest way. So overall, while chimerism can result in complexities in reproductive development, individuals are generally classified reproductively as male or female based on the predominant genetic and anatomical characteristics. So there's never been a genetically trans individual recorded as well, anywhere in medical literature or historic literature. So we're just talking about genetics in the study. That's all we're talking about here. Not how people feel, not how they identify, just what do the genetics say. So then we can have abnormal genes in sexual development. So first, let's talk about the SRY. So the sex determining region Y. The male gene can show up on an XX individual, and they can develop testicles instead of ovaries if that happens. So if somehow you have SRY in a female individual, XX individual, you can have a woman, a genetic woman, who instead of ovaries is born with testicles, which is really, I'm sure for that individual would be very confusing and very hard, and I have a lot of sympathy for that. WNT4 promotes ovary development. Multiple copies can produce incomplete ovary gonads in XY individuals. So you can have a male XY who is born with ovaries. And then you can have complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. And that basically, the layman's terms, there's better medical description of it, but to put it down into like the average YouTube viewer, that basically means you become immune to male sex hormones. And so you have testicles and XY chromosomes, but exterior genitals may appear to be female or in between. It can create kind of a weird development where it doesn't look normal, it doesn't look stereotypical. And again, for these individuals, it can be very, very confusing if you are this person born with this syndrome. Then you can have congenital adrenal hyperplasia that's underproduced cortisol and overproduced androgen, resulting in internal female gonads. So what's producing estrogen, right, and progesterone can be inside of perhaps an XY individual. So let's get to some of these. XX male syndrome. Okay, this is someone with double X chromosomes who has the SRY, sex determining region Y gene inside of them. Individuals with XX male syndrome are considered genetically male in terms of their sexual chromosomes, in terms of their sex chromosomes. So because they have SRY, sex determining region Y, even though the rest of their chromosomes are female, they have the SRY gene, which does create a male individual. In XX male syndrome, individuals have two X chromosomes, but also possess the SRY gene, which is responsible for male sex determination. The presence of the SRY gene on one of the X chromosomes triggers testicular development during embryonic development, leading to the development of male secondary sexual characteristics, which can mean testicles and a penis. From a genetic standpoint, individuals with XX male syndrome have a genetic makeup that includes the SRY gene and other genetic factors associated with male development, making them genetically male despite having two X chromosomes. Individuals with XX male syndrome cannot give birth. They do not have the reproductive anatomy required for gestation and childbirth. Therefore, they're unable to conceive and carry a pregnancy. Essentially, they're not genetically trans. So even if your chromosomes are female, XX, this gene determines whether you're male or female. And if you have this gene, then Christians would say God created you male. So although we'll say, well, hold on, look at the chromosomes. Well, the Bible doesn't talk about chromosomes. The Bible talks about male and female, he created them. And what we can see genetically, it's not your chromosomes, it's this SRY gene. So not genetically trans, though can be very confusing. Again, my heart goes out to anyone born with this. And so XY with multiple copies of WNT4, if you're XY, that means that Y chromosome still has the SRY gene. So you're still going to be male. That's what determines it. So in a typical male development, individuals have one chromosome, one X chromosome and one Y chromosome, XY. The presence of the Y chromosome, particularly the SRY gene located on it, is typically associated with male sex determination and the development of male reproductive structures. Even if an XY individual carries multiple copies of the WNT4 gene, which may lead to incomplete ovarian development or the formation of ovotestes, which I can only assume is weird gonadal development, or atypical. I shouldn't say weird, but atypical. When I say weird in this video, please forgive me, I mean atypical. Their genetic makeup still includes an X and Y chromosome, indicating male sex chromosomes. So while variations in gene expression and abnormalities in certain genes, such as WNT4, can influence sexual development and reproductive anatomy, they do not alter the fundamental genetic sex determination of the individual. Therefore, an XY individual with multiple copies of the WNT4 gene would still be considered genetically male. Essentially, they are not genetically trans. Now, they cannot be impregnated, they cannot birth children. Though, if they're based on how their genitals, right, if there's no mutation, if there's no atypical abnormalities, they can potentially father children, right, as long as there's nothing going on down there. And we'll talk about the summary of this soon. Next, we're going to get to complete androgen insensitivity syndrome. This would still make you a male, but this is very difficult. This is the most problematic one for Christians who are thinking through this. In complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, CAIS, individuals have XY chromosomes, indicating a male genetic makeup. However, due to the inability of their cells to respond to androgens, their bodies develop along a female or intersex phenotype. Despite having testes instead of ovaries, this can result in external genitalia that appear typically female or ambiguous. So inside of them, they'll have testes, which they can produce sperm, not estrogen, right? But their genitalia, when you look at the plumbing, as Christians would say, it's going to look female. So the idea of just looking at the plumbing doesn't work. It doesn't work because someone can look down and look completely female down there, but actually have XY chromosomes and testes inside of them that produce sperm, not estrogen, right? So complete androgen insensitivity syndrome is considered rare, extremely rare. And the exact number of reported cases worldwide is not precisely known. However, CAIS is estimated to occur in approximately 1 in 20,000 or 1 in 64,000 live births, making it relatively uncommon. So essentially, even though this individual would have their work cut out for them, I mean, I'm imagining that there would be a lot of therapy involved to figure this out. They would not be genetically trans. They are genetically male, as they have an SRY gene, and they have gonads inside of them that produce testes inside of them that produce sperm. Essentially, this is the most, I think, CAIS. If someone came to me and if I talked to someone, they had CAIS, I would want to listen, not talk, right? I'd want to ask them about their life, how they were born, and if they were willing to tell me, no one has a right to their story, right? But if they were willing to share it, I would be willing to listen, shut up and listen. I'd like to listen to this individual. So we'll get to the last one. So this one's congenital adrenal hyperplasia, and the question is this make you male or female? Congenital adrenal hyperplasia, CAH, is a group of inherited disorders characterized by deficiencies in enzymes involved in the synthesis of cortisol, aldosterone, or both. Cortisol is a crucial hormone involved in various physiological processes, including metabolism, immune response, and stress regulation, while aldosterone helps regulate salt and water balance in the body. Here's how CAH can affect reproductive development. Androgen excess. In individuals with CAH, the excess production of androgens can lead to virilization, masculinization of external genitalia in female fetuses during prenatal development. This can result in varying degrees of genital ambiguity, with external genitalia appearing more masculine than typically female. In severe cases, the external genitalia may resemble that of a male. So this is going to be where the genitals are produced, and there's going to be what we would consider an abnormality or a mutation. It's not probably going to look anything like an actual organ at all. It's going to be quite hard. Ambiguous is the word there. But in extreme cases, it may resemble a penis. It might. So essentially, CAH can happen in male and females, but will not result in someone who is genetically trans. So again, although the organ's there, they're going to be, if they have the SRY gene, they're male. If they don't, they're female. So it can create what appears to be issues. So just looking at the plumbing, quote unquote, on these individuals isn't good enough. So just look at the plumbing. Today, we've seen that a very small percentage of humans just looking at the plumbing may not be enough. And some unfortunate individuals may not even be born with what looks like plumbing, what we would consider. However, in every case, the individual is genetically male or female. This does mean that the Bible was true. Male and female, God created us, that you're either born with the SRY gene or you're not. Now, for those who don't believe in God, this is not the video for you, right? But I'm speaking to people who are either deists or open deists or progressive Christians, right? But who I'm speaking to are people who would say, hey, there's a spectrum. God didn't create us male and female. He created us on a spectrum. Well, we can see genetically where the science is at right now. Genetically, what we see is, it's male or female genetically. You're either genetically male or genetically female. So, why did I say genetically trans, though? Okay, why did I say genetically trans? While we've affirmed that God created us genetically binary, male or female, the makeup of our minds can get quite confused. In a previous video, I spoke out about Jungian archetypes, where Carl Jung talked about how we can fit certain roles with the hero, the mother, the shadow. And a lot of times you don't have one role. You go through multiples and you possess multiple inside of you. But in a similar sense, we have studied and mapped brains well enough to find a common pattern in genetic male versus female neurology, what we would consider a typical male or female mind. However, this is very important. It's also worth noting that there's such a wide variety in expression and overlap that it's actually pretty hard to say all males or females have similar neurology. So my wife and I can actually have very similar neurology. Certain things might be different, but there's going to be a lot of overlap. It's not like that is hands down a female brain and that is hands down a male brain, or that a female who has what would look like the physiological neurology, the neurological makeup, the regions of the brain and their size. So physically and functionally, the way it's fires off could look exactly like a male, and that could be a very female individual. And that would not be weird. Again, in my neurology video, I wanted to point out that we don't have humans mapped out. Like, I program. That's one of my hobbies. And so when I'm programming an app or something like that, like, I know when you run your code, if it errors out, you can go find the exact line of code where something went wrong. Or if your code does something, you can go see why the code does something. Human brains are not like that. Human brains don't work that way, right? Going all the way back to Alan Turing and his Turing test. But so we've talked about brain structures, neurotransmitter systems, hormonal influences, and genetic variability. But here's what I will say. You can, so what I'm getting at is talking about gender dysphoria. So while people may be genetically trying to get my mouse off the screen. There we go. While people may be genetically gender binary, so you're genetically male or female, that's genetically. Those with DSD issues report a higher, differences in sexual development, they report a higher issue with gender dysphoria. Now I want to point out, this is 2%, not of the American population. This is 2% of all population worldwide. And you got to imagine, there's a lot of other countries, third world and the like, where they're not taking a census on these things. But either way, so that 2% could skew one way or the other. But it's a very small amount. But even so, I want to say, with that small amount, like, if you have DSD, I'd love to listen, love to hear. But I also don't want to say, if you don't have DSD, I don't want to hear from you. Shut your mouth. Like, that's not where I'm going with this. There's a lot of reasons beyond DSD regarding prenatal, adolescent development, and that some may not feel like they were born the right gender, or they're trapped in the wrong body. It can be things that happen to you as a kid. It can be things that happen to you in the womb. In that really long, boring video I had, we talked about how before you're born in your mother's womb, based on androgen receptors and estrogen and all of that stuff, can affect how you are born. You're not genetically determined to be homosexual. You're not genetically determined to be trans, but you can be born with predispositions to something like that. And then based on how you're raised, again, how you're raised doesn't determine how you turn out, but it can also take advantage or lead to different neurological, physical neurological makeup. Your brain can actually change, and the way it works, both physically and functionally, right, can be pre-programmed to be confused about your gender, confused about your sexuality. And so gay brain, straight brain, like male brain, female brain, while we've studied the neurological makeup and the physical and functional differences between male and female, homosexual and heterosexual brains, there is no such thing as a gendered brain or a sexual orientation brain. So we've talked about neurological predispositions. We've talked about genetic predispositions, but none of that's determined. So there's no such thing as a gay brain. There's no such thing as a straight brain. There's no such thing as a female brain. There's no such thing as a male brain, not according to what we're seeing in studies. So neurology has identified patterns and archetypes, and that's why I referenced Jung, but the overlap between archetypical patterns is immense and not at all worth marking any specific neurological makeup as stereotypical, right? So you can't say, I was born with a female brain, I was born with a male brain. You can feel that way. You can make a subjective statement that way. You can make an opinion. You can have an opinion on that, but it's not fact. It's not genetic fact. It's not neurological fact. There is nothing that supports that. But now let's get into this. The trans community. So now we're getting to how Christians treat the trans community. People who have neurological makeup that is more typical, but not stereotypical, of the opposite gender, they're obviously going to affect how they think, what they desire, how they act. We've seen that. Suicide rates among these individuals is extremely high. A new study from the William Institute at UCLA School of Law finds that 81% of transgender adults in the US have thought about suicide. 42% of transgender adults have attempted it, and 56% have engaged in non-suicidal self-injury, self-harm over their lifetimes. So is it psychological or genetic? Like, what causes this? Is it psychological or is it genetic? Sociological research in Australia, published in 2016, found that 3% of respondents use the term disorders of sex development, or DSD, to define their sex characteristic. This means of the 81% of suicidal members of the trans community, only about 2.4% have the genetic DSDs that we discussed here. So that being said, we're seeing suicide rates at an all-time high. We're seeing self-harm at an all-time high. And is it because they have DSDs? No. Is it because of their genetics? No. Not from what we're seeing. Only of the 81% of the suicidal members, only about 2.4% have DSDs or some sort of genetic issue going on. So that means that the large majority of these members of this community who are having this problem, it's psychological, it's neurological, it is something to discuss and talk about and go to therapy and all of that, counseling, and go talk about how your mental health is doing, but it's not something that you're genetically predisposed to, at least not for the majority. So we've been seeing this ideology, this community, this activism. So within the community, the activism, the ideology of the LGBTQIA plus movement is that, well, my kid was born this way, and I just want to respect how they were born. And honestly, what we're seeing amongst Hollywood individuals, we're seeing Hollywood individuals be like, oh, I have 3 kids and they're all non-binary and trans, and it's like, what are you doing to your children, right? Because it's the ratios and the numbers don't work out that way. And so we're seeing a lot of community ideology and activism that is growing this community. So the number of people who identify as transgender has nearly doubled in recent years, according to a new report that captures a stark generational shift in emerging societal embrace of a diversity of gender identities. So there's a new report, and I actually linked it here in case we want to go to it. So I'll put it up here. The Williams Institute Law, UCLA.edu. I also put that there to remind me to link it in the description. But what we're seeing is the analysis relying on government health surveys conducted from 2017 to 2020 estimated that 1.4% of 13 to 17-year-olds and 1.3% of 18 to 24-year-olds were transgender, compared with about 0.5% of all adults. The trans community is doubling. Why? Because of nurture, not nature. That's what we're seeing. It's not a genetic, born this way thing that's happening. It is a nurturing environment that is creating I want to say this. That's what the studies are showing. That's what the studies are leaning to presently. You might ask, why don't you have a study from 2024? Because you need to give a study time to breathe. Study needs to be formulated. It needs to be evaluated. It needs to be pushed out and commented on. So that's why our studies are 2020, right? Not 2024. This means more and more the next generation is embracing this community either as a choice or as a product of their environments. And so Christians then, the Christian community begins to fight this community, and this is where the war comes. And so this is where we get word soup. Word soup, thou shalt not lie. This is a quote from Huey P. Newton. He who controls the language controls the masses. He who controls the masses rules the world. Language has become the forefront and the front line of the culture war. LGBTQIA plus members refuse to converse if you don't use their inclusive language. They consider it hate speech, harmful, dead naming, misgendering, all of this stuff. Christians refuse to use inclusive language. And so in doing so, Christians become nothing to those people. So we're going to get into that argument. But first, I want to point out that who's wrong here? Well, both sides are causing the war. When people say, I'm going to use new terms that these conservative people have never heard before, and they have to speak my language to talk to me, you're creating a system in which you're creating a new dialogue system and saying you have to play by the rules to come talk to me. So the wall is put up by them first, right? So the LGBTQI plus community puts up that wall first. They say, hey, here's this wall. You can't come to me unless you use this language. Christians, then they're like, well, they come from this culture war mindset. Whoever controls the language controls the masses, right? And so they won't bow down. I've been watching, Jordan Peterson and his battle with that community. And it's interesting because when you listen to Jordan Peterson, he's far more an ally to their cause than most Christian conservatives would be. He will tell you that psychologically you can't turn a gay person straight. It's not going to work out. They're not going to lead a good life. He will talk about gender dysphoria, about people feeling like they're born in the wrong body. And he says that while he says he won't affirm it through therapy, he also says that he won't fight it. He says he wants to help them question their identity, shape their identity. So it's not as much as he's become an ally of the right. His whole political issue has been that he doesn't want to have his language controlled. So when language was mandated, because he's so obsessed with Soviet Russia and communism and socialism and how horrible the world turns, that he's seen it through reading like Fyodor Dostoevsky and similar authors, right? That he's like, no, we can't give up the language. I can't give up the language. So I'll talk to you. I'll hang out with you. We can hang out, but you can't control my tongue. And so I read this book in seminary called Anthropological Insights for Missionaries. What a page turner that was. It also read a book with it called How to Help Without Hurting. And as I studied missionaries and the work of missionaries, here's the process missionaries go through. First, they're going to engage in cultural immersion. Missionaries strive to immerse themselves in the culture that they are entering. This involves living among the local people, learning their language, customs, traditions, and ways of life. Immersion allows the missionaries to gain first-hand experience and understanding of the cultural context in which they'll be working. So, I don't have water next to me today, and I'm talking for like an hour straight. But anyways, should have had some water. They're going to go into the culture. Now, when you look at a pride parade, off to the side of the pride parade is a bunch of angry Christians waving signs saying, God hates you, you're going to hell, like all this horrible stuff. That's not how missionaries immerse themselves into a culture. They don't walk into feudal Japan going, the emperor is a heretic, right? Like everyone's going to burn. First, they just kind of learn the culture. Next, they're going to engage in observation and listening. Missionaries prioritize listening to and learning from the local community. They observe social dynamics, religious practices, beliefs, values, and needs. By actively listening and observing, missionaries seek to build rapport, establish trust, and gain insight into the challenges and opportunities within the community. I want to use Paul in Athens as an example. I wish I'd pulled up the scripture for it. Sometimes I don't prepare to go these ways. Paul went in Athens and he saw all this idol worship going. He learned their gods, and then he went and he said, they had a statue to the unknown God. He said, I've come to teach you about what you don't know. Like I come from the unknown God. Does it say that Paul was overjoyed at their community, that he loved their idol worship? No. But he sat there long enough to listen, learn, and observe, and then he spoke using their language. Building relationships. Missionaries focus on building relationships with community members. They seek to establish genuine connections based on respect, empathy, and mutual understanding. Building relationships is foundational to the effective mission work and opens doors for collaboration, partnership, and shared learning. When a missionary goes, I've got this other book called Spirit of the Rainforest, and it's about the Yanomoto people in the rainforest. And when the missionaries showed up, they didn't initially say that all the shamans had to convert to Jesus Christ before they're going to heal them or give them medicine or teach them the Bible. They didn't say that. They showed up and they became friends and a part of that community while the community was still very much pagan. So it's not convert first, then you get Jesus, right? That's not how missionaries work. Now you can throw stones at missionaries all you want. If you're a Christian out there and you're like, you're wrong, you're an idiot, well, sure. You can call me an idiot all you want, but you gotta attack. No, just know that you're picking a fight with the missionary process, not with me. What I'm citing here is the missionary process. So, cultural sensitivity and humility. Missionaries approach their interactions with cultural sensitivity and humility, recognizing that they are guests in a new cultural context. They strive to avoid imposing their own cultural norms or values instead seek to adapt and contextualize their message and ministry to the cultural context of the community. Paul said, I'm here. You have a statue to the inscription to the unknown God? Well, I know that God. I'm here to teach him to you. They're sensitive. They bring medicine. They heal. They love. They build relationships. They identify points of connection. So through cultural immersion and observation, missionaries identify points of connection between the Christian message and the cultural context of the community. They look for ways to present the gospel in a manner that resonates with the cultural worldview, addressing local needs and aspirations. So all of this says that missionaries are going to enter into the world of this community. They're going to love on them. They're going to listen to them. They're going to learn about them. They're going to use the language that they need to use to reach them. They're going to have humanitarian efforts to help them. Now, where I can think of mission work, it would be bad. And in feudal Japan, one of the issues that they had with the Christians when they came in was it seemed like they were trying to westernize the Japanese. So they were taken away, and the samurai specifically and other older, more traditional Japanese felt like they weren't allowed to be Japanese anymore if they turned Christian, right? So that's cultural contextualization done wrong. We're not trying to take other cultures and make them American and then Christian. We're trying to bring the gospel to other communities. And so Paul in 1 Corinthians 9, 21 through 22 says, he becomes all things to all people. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law. Though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. Look at this. Christians, this is so important. This video is going to go long, unfortunately. We're almost done, though. Oh, geez. Okay. It's going to go long, but this is important. Paul didn't say that his strategy was the most effective, right? I think if he came in guns blazing with an army of angels at his side, burning the town down, saying convert or burn, like almost like the accusation is of Emperor Constantine when he became Christian. It's now illegal to not be a Christian. That might be more effective by the numbers. But that's not the process God tells us to do. So you know what? I enter into these communities. I use inclusive language. I love on these people. I pray for them. I tell them I'm praying for them. I don't tell them I'm praying, hey, I'm praying God makes you straight. I'm praying for their sick boyfriend or sick girlfriend. I'm praying for their health. I'm praying for their surgeries. I'm praying for their mental health. Really, when I talk to a lot of these people, what we focus on is more mental health than anything else. When I walk into that community, when I enter that community, we don't really talk about all of these ideological issues and political leanings. I'm checking up on their mental health. How have you been? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? Are you okay? It's the medicine that they need. And then when they have something going on, someone is sick, I pray for them. And one of my favorite friends, who is not Christian in the slightest, says, Bryce, I really appreciate that you reach out to the highest power that you believe in on my behalf. And we are sweet friends. And the other day, I've been through a lot of hard things in my life, and I've just been in this community, loving these people. And the other day, he saw a picture of me with my new wife and kids going on vacation, and he said, wow, Bryce, it brings my heart so much joy to see that smile again. He was loving me back. He said, look, there's that smile you used to have before all the horrible stuff happened to you. He loves me. I love him. And so I become weak to those who are weak, or lawless to those who become lawless, not because I'm under the law. I'm not pushing them into harm, right? When they have a bottom surgery to have their parts chopped off, I'm not telling them that's a great idea. You should do that. I'd like to warn them about the study. I'd like to tell them that I'm going to be here for them before and after the surgery. I'd like to tell them before, up until the point that they have the surgery, and even after, there's nothing wrong with them. That they were born beautiful and amazing, and when they look in the mirror, they should feel nothing but pride and satisfaction for their design. That they don't need to go through with this surgery if they can avoid it, if I can convince them to avoid it. There's some where when I first meet them, the surgery's 2 weeks away and I don't even know them. And you know what? Unfortunately, I have to stand by because I don't have the relationship yet to say, no, don't do that. Please don't. I just say, hey, I love you, praying for you. And I don't really speak up much when they talk about their surgery. Why? Because I don't really know them. We're still like 2 weeks in. But once I build that relationship, once I build an inroad, I gain a voice in their community to speak love, to be labeled an ally, even though I'm still overtly Christian. They bring me their friends and they say, this is Bryce. He's a pastor. But no, wait. He's a really great guy. Let's hang out with him. They invite me to play games with them. So let's explore some of the stories of those who have converted from homosexual to straight. Or we have one at the end who's transitioned from male to female. So we have Jackie Hill Perry. I'm gonna leave this up. You can pause the video for the sake of time. I'm not gonna go through all the stories at once, but Jackie Hill Perry wrote a book, Gay Girl, Good God. I really highly recommend the book. But her personal conviction, just between her and God, as she began to study the Bible, she's like, I can't be a homosexual anymore. So she converted to heterosexual lifestyle, though she still admits to having same-sex attraction. So we would call her probably in the trans community or LGBTQIA plus community, they call them, bi. But she's married. She has a husband and kids. She admits that, she can have dreams of her old girlfriend. She confesses those to her husband. He works with him through her and loves her in that. And she repents of it and she doesn't affirm it. And what converted her? We'll get through that. Becket Cook had career success and was still miserable. He overheard Christians at a coffee table, and he's like, hey, can I pull up a chair and just listen to your Bible study? They invited him to sit on the study. Eventually, they invited him to church. He heard the word of God and turned his life around to become a Christian. Rosaria Butterfield was writing a research project. She was like hyper-feminist. And she was writing a research project critical of the Promise Keepers movement. And she was invited to speak to Ken Smith, who was kind of leading that, Pastor Ken Smith. She began reading the Bible through her discussion and having dinner with him and his wife. And she decided she wanted to be a Christian. She turned her life around. Christopher Yuan, he was a dentist who was doing bad things, selling drugs, all this kind of stuff, wound up in prison. In the trash, he found a Bible. Reading the Bible brought him personal conviction about the Bible. He thought it was transcendent and amazing. He joined prison Bible studies, joined a church, and turned his life around. And he's now an outspoken Christian activist. And then there's Walt Hayer. He attempted to transition from male to female. It didn't bring him satisfaction. It didn't work out the way he wanted. And he detransitioned, but was still an atheist. And afterwards, he found church, found God, found Christ. Here's what I would point out about all these people. Jackie O'Perry was living within her community, the LGBTQIA plus community, and she found God. She was living in sin, living in her actions that she would now herself personally call sin. Yet, despite that, while she was yet sinning, while she was yet a sinner, she found God. Becket Cook, living within his community, found Christian community, was invited in. He asked if he could have a seat at the table. They said, yes, you can have a seat at our table. Found God. Rosaria Butterfield, living within her community, writing a hit piece on a Christian movement, was shown love, was invited to dinner, and found God. Christopher Yuan, living with the consequences of his sin, found out that he was not too far for God and turned his life to God. Ann Polk, living within her community, felt depression, searched for answers, found God. Walt Hayer lived within his community, felt drawn out of his community, in exile between his communities, found God. You know what none of these people say? None of them say that they read a hateful sign and decided to become Christian. None of these people say that they were dragged by their parents to therapy that they didn't want, they didn't sign up for, ambushed, and were locked in a basement, had electroshock therapy, or weren't allowed to talk to people of the opposite gender to affirm the God-given gender. All those horrible things that happen in convergent therapy did not turn them to God. It was love. And so here we see ask, seek, knock, find, hear, grow. This is what the Bible says. Ask, seek, knock, find, hear, grow. Okay, Matthew 7:7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. Jesus is saying if you search him, he's been there all along. Behold, he stands at the door and knocks. Matthew 11:15, Jesus said, he who has an ear, let him hear. And then Matthew 13:4-7, Jesus says, but it works like this. As a sower, as Christians, as God, as the Holy Spirit, as he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path and birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. They don't have ears to hear. They're not seeking. They're not asking. They're not finding. And so we look at Paul and he says, in order, by all possible means, as I might save some. When I talk to Christians about strategies, about how to love this community, how to enter this community, well, Bryce, that's a lot of work. That's a lot of pain. That's a lot of compromise, is what they would think. For so little return. Judge a tree by its fruit, right? If that's the right way to evangelize, Bryce, we should see massive, just amazing fruit coming from our efforts, just raining down all around us. Well, is that what happened to Paul? No, it's not what happened to Paul. He saved some. He saved some. So here's my approach. Here's what I would like to share with you guys today. So it's my approach. As for me, I've never compromised, ever. I've never once been less Christian. And I've openly told my trans, gay, non-binary friends that I was praying for them. Not to change them. I was praying for things that they appreciated prayer for. Now, in my heart, I pray for them. I have friends who are atheist, trans, Wiccan, Satanist, all sorts of different like creeds and denominations, and I'll be honest, in my own private prayer time, I pray that they find God. Why? Because I love them too much not to pray for them. That I believe that there's life after death. I would have to be a monster not to pray for them. I would have to be a monster if I truly believe that when we die, if that's my own personal conviction, if I truly believe that when I die, there's a heaven or hell, then I'd have to be a monster not to pray for their salvation, right? To pray that they'd be condemned to that fate. But with them, I'm loving, I'm open, I pray for what they appreciate prayer for. I listen, I share my own hurts in dreams. Now, when I'm hurting, when I went through my divorce, when my son was in the hospital, I let them know what's going on. But when I'm questioning God's goodness, I go to my Christian men and women and friends and family who lift me up and support me. They pray for me. They read me scriptures. They put their arms around me. They drink with me. They toast me. They help me. They provide. It's not that I withdraw from that other community, but when I need help, I'm going to go to people who I think lift me up, right? So I've expressed desires for them not to take hormone therapy and bottom surgeries. I express that. I say, hey, you're not because they would be ruining the image of God, right? But because I told them there's nothing wrong with the way they were born, that when they look in the mirror, they should feel nothing but self-love, and that love comes from God, and they were made in his image, and they are beautiful and wonderful. And you'll see that message fits right within the progressive message. What progressive Christians want to say is that you were made in his image, born this way, beautiful. But notice, I'm not affirming homosexual desires. I'm not saying that that's okay, go do that, get married. I'm not telling people to have bottom surgery, top surgery, to cut off pieces of themselves because it will somehow make them feel better, when honestly, the studies around that are pretty messed up. Because when you Google it, everything at first is say, it's great, it's great, it's great, it's great. But when you get into the stories, they don't shape out that way. And so at their core, I tell them there's nothing wrong with you. You were born beautiful and wonderful. But we don't have to compromise. I don't have to say, therefore, God is less God or God is less right. But he loves you, that you're beautifully and wonderfully made. That you don't need surgery. You don't need hormones. You don't need any of that. But I want to help you as best as I can help you. I want to love you as best as I can love you. But I'm not going to encourage you to drink poison. I'm not going to slap things out of your hand. I'm not going to say, oh, that's great poison you're drinking. Here, drink up, drink more. Do that. Studies don't support it. Genetics don't support it. The Bible doesn't support it. But sure, do it anyways. I love you. That's not what I say. But I'm here for you. I love you. I'm praying for you. And honestly, I don't even hate the sin, love the sinner, right? It's not that for me. I love the sinner. I don't hate anything. I hate for them to be harmed. That's what I hate. I hate for them to be harmed. And so this call at 1 hour and 1 minute, 2 minutes in a second, I just want to call Christians to look at this approach, see how nuanced it is. Can you just look at the plumbing? Mostly yes, but you know what? For some, no. Is it just the chromosomes? Mostly yes, but for some, no. Even so, does that level the playing field? Is everyone the same? Should you just tell everyone to suck it up, get over it, deal with it? This is what the Bible says, or God hates you? No, not at all. I encourage people to look at Paul, to be all things to all people. And sure, I said that community put up the wall. We won't talk to you unless you use our language. And the Christian fear is to say, well, thou shalt not lie. If I use your pronouns, if I do this, that, or the next thing, then I am lying before God. That I am affirming your delusion. All this. They put up the wall. I just believe that my God can bring walls down. I believe that my God can bring walls down. So I'm not worried about the wall. I'm worried about the love. That if I can speak in the tongues of angels, if I know prophecies, if I can do all these things, but I don't have love, then I'm nothing. I've wasted my time. So let us learn from missionaries. I'd like to encourage people to be missionaries. We need more Western missionaries. We send so many missionaries out. That's great. I love that we do that. Please don't stop doing that. I think everyone who goes out to these other countries is called to these other countries. My question to you, Christian listening, is how many of you are called to be missionaries here? To stop hiding behind your Facebook walls, to stop hiding behind your political ideology, to get into cultural immersion, to observe and listen, to build relationships, to be sensitive to the culture and have humility, to identify points of connection, right? I'm not asking you to compromise. Paul didn't love what was going on in Athens, but he listened and observed and built relationships. And why? That we might save some. Might save some. Ultimately, it's not between them and the Holy Spirit, not us. So don't do it for the results. Don't do it to give an evangelism, see how many people raise their hand in a tent. It's not about that. It's between them and the Holy Spirit. We sow seeds. And we trust God to swing away the birds, to water that soil, to tear out the thorns. That's between the Holy Spirit and them. Christians, I hope this has been enlightening, encouraging, and I hope you've learned something. This will probably be the last. I assume this will be the last video that I do on this, and I'm going to move on to other topics now. Maybe go back to some previous topics. But I thought that this was worth pausing and spending a lot of my time on. So I hope that all of my effort has been a blessing to some. Maybe not the many, and that all the comments that I get of people like, shut up, no one likes you, that they're going to be worth it for that one silent person who just watches and goes, wow, I learned something. All right. Love you guys. God bless you. Bye.